Eleanor Roosevelt once said, "The future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams." Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, whether you're a student or 20, 30, 40 something, considering the trajectory of your career, today I ask you to consider who owns your future. What do I mean by this? You heard the name Steven Spielberg? When he was in middle school, he made 8mm films of collisions starring his toy train sets. He was bullied all through middle school and high school and barely graduated. Then the summer of his 18th year, he went on a tour of Universal Studios and had a chance conversation with a man named Chuck Silvers, who was a director in the editorial department. Mr. Silvers invited him to visit sometime, and Spielberg showed up the next day in a suit and a tie with his daddy's briefcase full of sandwiches and candy bars. He went to that studio every single day that summer and sat in on meetings with directors and writers, including Chuck Silvers, who never gave away his secret. He found an empty office and had the audacity to put his name and room number 23C in the building directory. 10 years later, Spielberg became the youngest television director ever hired by Universal. And as we all know, he eventually became the most commercially successful film director of all time. Little Steven Spielberg, he owned his future. Who owns your future? What future did you see for yourself as a child? I decided that I would be a writer and storyteller when I was 9 years old. My parents and my teachers all the way through high school said, "That's a pipe dream, you can't earn a living like that, why don't you look for a real job?" Every dream worth pursuing will be challenged. It took me years, decades really, to understand why they said those things to me. It was because they either never had a dream or they gave up their dream when someone made those statements to them. Dr. Mani, a pediatric cardiologist, tells stories of his little patients, many of whom struggle just to breathe. They go through a surgery that's the equivalent of being hit by an 18-wheeler, and yet, he says, many of them are up running around the hospital ward playing within a day or two. And Dr. Mani is very clear when he says they have no choice. To give up is to die. Have you given up? Have you let your dreams die? Or have you taken a stance despite the odds and said, "Oh yeah, watch me"? I've come to understand that a dream worth pursuing has several things in common. First is that it must be work that matters. In the 1960s, medical scientists knew that blood vessels were not necessary for cancer tumors to grow. But Dr. Judah Folkman disagreed. For 2 decades, his colleagues mocked him, until in the 1980s, when he and his team discovered the first angiogenesis inhibitors, drugs that stop the growth of blood vessels and thus choke off the life of cancerous tumors. In the decades since then, Dr. Volkmann's work has saved millions of lives, my own included. He said, the trick is to find a project that is worth persistent effort. It must be work that matters to you and possibly to the greater world. Number 2, it must be work you love. Twyla Tharp, the legendary choreographer, failed every single audition she attended in her late teens and early 20s. She was too short to be a Radio City Rockette and lacked the technical skills of a ballerina. What could she do? She started her own company. And all these years later, she has been choreographing feature-length films, full-length ballets, Broadway shows, even Olympic figure skating routines. And her troupe is still today considered amongst the best in the world. When it is work you love, you don't give up. And number 3, you must be willing to leverage your strengths. I am the first one to admit that I am deeply challenged by math, even at the simplest level. I count on my fingers, and I screw up even with a calculator. This is why every bit of the accounting for my business for the last 25 years has been handled by a CPA. But I can sit and write stories or come up with ideas, write content for hours on end, with my work often getting stronger, cleaner, better the longer I sit, because writing and storytelling are my strengths. You must be willing to leverage your strengths and either delegate or automate everything else. Eleanor Roosevelt said, "The future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams." Ladies and gentlemen, I ask you one last time, who owns your future?